On behalf of USISPF, USAID, GTG Rise, and Ministry of Power, I welcome all of you to the Industry Advisory Council panel on private sector investments, a key enabler to advancing clean energy transition. Without taking much time, I would like to call on Monali. So Monali Zia Hazra is the Regional Energy Manager and Clean Energy Specialist at USAID, India. Welcome, Monali, for the opening remarks. Over to you, Monali.
Oh, thank you so much, Sid. And on behalf of the United States Agency for International Development, or USAID, USISPF, and the IAC, I am really delighted to, welcome everybody to this side event on the sidelines of the National Conference on Large-Scale Integration of Renewable Energy, which we have been organizing since last 2 days. The program is being hosted as a part of the GTG Rise initiative, which is a bilateral program between USAID and Ministry of Power, with the objective to support, large-scale integration of renewable energy. In past for almost 5 years, we've been working with Government of India closely with many of the stakeholders to undertake and implement several pilots, undertake a lot of analytical modeling studies, and engineer a lot of peer-to-peer partnership. One of the key things or mandates of the Green Integrate Rise initiative was also to enhance private sector engagement. Obviously, there's so much to do in this space that it's not possible only for the government to do it. So private sector is one of the key players in the whole space. They bring in a lot of expertise, they bring in a lot of capital, and they also bring in a lot of advanced knowledge on advanced technology, which is very useful in order to push the agenda forward in order to reach the GOI's goals of 450 gigawatt of renewable energy. And with this mandate, we had partnered with USISPF to set up this industry advisory council, which is a kind of a platform for both US and Indian companies to get together to not only to exchange information, share knowledge, but also to see opportunities where both the sides companies could get together to support us in our work of supporting GOI in large-scale integration of renewable energy. I'm happy to note that the IAC was able to conduct several events, was able to organize one-to-one discussions with number of policy makers, and was able to make a difference in the whole agenda. They were a key integral part of, many of the IAC members were key and integral part of our engagement and discussion, especially in the implementation of pilots, whether it was, the experts group and so on and so forth. So I'm really delighted to see many of the panel members are also part of the IAC, and we hope at USAID to continue to engage the private sector closely, and hopefully also with the IAC as one of our platform to engage with the private sector as we move forward with the deployment of our new program called South Asia Regional Energy Partnership. I once again welcome you all to this event, to this particular event, and I thank our partners in this whole initiative, USISPF, for collaborating with us on this initiative. And once again, welcome, and thank you so much for inviting me. Over to you, Sid.
Thank you, Monali, and thank you for being a great support to all of us. Thank you, Manali. Thank you for being a great support to the entire program and to the IAC platform. Now, I would like to welcome and introduce Ms. Gauri Johar. Gauri is Executive Director, Energy Transition and Clean Tech Consulting at IHS Markit, and will be introducing a stellar panel of speakers to to speak. Gauri has spent more than 20 years in the energy sector and knows the length and the breadth of the sector. Over to you, Gauri.
Thank you so much, Siddharth. Thanks to USISPF and USAID to have IHS Market here to really bring out a great discussion with these fabulous panelists that we have in the renewable sector. I'd like to introduce our experts on the panel here. We have Parag Sharma, who's CEO of O2 Power. We have Vineet Mittal, who's chairman of Avada Energy. We have Sanjeev Agarwal, who is the managing director and CEO of Amplus Energy. We have Rajendra Srivastav, who's the president of AES India. And we have Peter Dupont, who's the managing partner of Asia Clean Energy Partners. I think what's fascinating about this panel that Monali, Siddharth, and Nolte have put together here is that really, you brought together new companies, new renewable companies who are bringing this hope and momentum to meet India's very ambitious renewable energy targets, which only get more ambitious by the day. But we also have, companies such as AES, which are bringing in newer innovations, and we'll talk about that in a short while. And of course, we have a fellow consultant. Great to see you also, Peter, here. So just as a backdrop, I think, we can argue about, the trillions of dollars of investment that it will take to meet ambitious targets, about integration, and how this whole energy system needs to be changed. But I think what is great today is that we're focusing on really the nature of private investment and what are the qualities of private investment, what are the skills, what are the frameworks, what is the risk-taking appetite that comes with it, and how can it also work with certain emerging, blended finance frameworks like the green bond frameworks, where it is under those types of criteria that private capital can be accessed, can thrive. So really I'm hoping that at the end of this, we have that better view across the horizon in terms of what is that more defined framework and role of private sector investment in accelerating clean energy. So I'd like to start with Parag. Parag, you are leading one of India's, leading renewable energy platforms. And, India has recently completed about 100 gigawatts in the renewable energy capacity addition and aiming, of course, for a more ambitious 450. So how vital do you feel grid integration will be in achieving that role? And then what's the role private sector can play? I think you're on mute, Parag. Parag, there's a problem with your sound.
Is it okay now?
Yes, it's okay now. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, Gauri, I was just saying that definitely we are talking about a big jump from 100 gigawatt in current year to almost 450 gigawatt in 2030, which means 50 gigawatt capacity addition every year. And though the country is only using 10% of its energy as renewable or in-firm power as of now, but definitely this number will grow to, let's say, 25% by 2030. And we need to start thinking about the grid integration, no doubt about it. But if we look at the numbers, so what exactly it costs to convert the infirm power to firm power, and that's where the utilities are really concerned about. They don't want to spend so much of amount in paying higher tariffs to convert renewable into a firm power. If we talk about solar, it's bid out at 214. If you see the last Teva bid, if you talk about wind, the number might be 277. Hybrid bid you have seen was 234. But moment we talk about firm power, and that's what SECI tried doing about a year back, they called a peaking power bid, where 4 hours tariff was 6 rupees plus. And till date, it has not been sold, though I understand that SECI is trying to about to close that particular bid. So the whole question is that is utilities ready to pay such a high price for converting this infirm power into firm power? But having said that, it doesn't mean that the grid integration problems only limited to calling for these kind of bids. It's a more wider topic. And what we see is that the first step is to try solving this problem using market mechanism. Later comes adding storage and the other elements to it. And with only 10% of the India's power being infirm, maybe the market mechanism can solve this problem for the short term. And slowly we need to move to other areas. So if we go to the CRC website, you will see multiple things being floated there. You will see ancillary services market paper there. You will see an MPED document there. But the challenge is that CRC has been talking about it from almost 6-7 years, but this is now really getting late. We have to start introducing these market mechanisms to begin with. So that is my first point. The second point that we IPPs are facing in India, that everybody really wants to get into storage. We want to get to the solutions which provide firm power, but there is no incentive in doing so. If imagine if we have a market where a distribution licensee area has been awarded to a particular entity, and it's only the retail tariff which is governed, and after that this entity is free to buy whatever amount of power without taking section 62, section 63 approvals, then it will lead to lot many innovations. So that market is yet to develop. Everybody in the sector is waiting for reforms on the distribution side, whereby there is a freedom given to an IPP to innovate and then work within the retail tariffs, which are being the only thing which is governed by the regulator. But as we all know, this is not the case. We are just limited to the innovations done by SECI. We try participating in those bids. Those bids have their own challenges. For X capacity of bid, we are asked to have 3X of install capacity so that we can give a 80% availability in that bid, which means that we have been made to take a risk of 40% of our power being merchant power. So that's the challenge we are facing as an IPP. We want to innovate, we want to experiment with different combinations of wind, solar, and storage, but there is hardly any opportunity to do so.
Right. Well, thanks, Parag. I think you laid the framework in terms of what is really needed for private capital in terms of a more market-based framework, a more market incentives to really match your risk appetite, to match the ability of what you're trying to bring onto the system. I think I'll go now to Vineet. And Vineet, you've had, I think, a very deep vision as a social entrepreneur. And I think you're almost like a climate evangelist when I see a lot of what you write. You've also, I think, transitioned your businesses and grown them and scaled them up to a level which has led to deals as well. So if you take what Parag just shared and your experience having sort of almost gone through 2 cycles of sort of M&A, or I mean, coming close to one more, how do you see potentially a G2G corridor, like say a US-India corridor, helping in this clean energy transition? If we take what Parag said, and how do you get it to the G2G framework?
Yeah, thank you, Gauri. I think Parag talked about a challenge which I think both MNRE Powers Ministry is trying to find long-term solution for. But if you look at from G2G perspective, India's plan is not unrealistic. I think it is doable. I still remember when I wrote my first business plan in 2009 to do 500 megawatt project of solar, and people were laughing. And I still remember there was a large manufacturer of wind who said it will never materialize. And so people are bound to have fear when things are not done to that scale. And fortunately, Indian government in this sector has a very consistent, reliable policy with a clear roadmap. There are few challenges which they continue to interact with industry and try to address. And so far through SECI structure and NTPC structure, they have protected the industry from payment security. And that's how we see that there is a 100 gigawatt project already operational. And as far as I know, there is a 40,000 plus megawatt of project which are under construction. In fact, we'll be commissioning additional 2.5 gigawatt this year. So almost every player is ramping up based on a lot of the projects which have been awarded. And in terms of G2G, I think I've been attending G20 Task Force and B20 Coordination Committee since last 11 years, and there has been a lot of discussion around how developed nation and particularly US can support on the energy transition. And one of the most low-hanging fruit is on the financing side. If you will look at most of the renewable company in India, except one or two, are funded by other sovereign wealth fund or pension fund, and the presence of US is very limited. And US institutional investors hold more than 26 trillion asset right now, and they are prioritizing huge investment into ESG space. And Renew's latest listing in the US is a reflection of that. And in my sense, I was talking to one of the largest fund house last month in US, and they said they have a 9 trillion fund and they have $1 trillion exposure to China and less than 20 billion to India. So I think there is a huge opportunity to kind of US-India corridor help energy transition by encouraging and educating probably through Indian government, Indian entrepreneurs to explain the opportunity much better, because if their neighbor Canadians are so bullish, so should be Americans about the opportunity here. Yeah. And I think their multilateral and bilateral institutes should also look at helping India to mobilize the finance to fund the green energy transition, and support even closure of high polluting coal plants on energy storage, and probably on the energy like technology also. So one of the good opportunity in India is government is focusing a lot, and they have got a policy framework to make manufacturing successful. If through G2G collaboration, the R&D organization and the technology organization can partner with Indian developer, there could be a huge synergy. Yeah, and if they can support Indian manufacturing ecosystem, the whole world is 95% plus dependent on a single country, which creates a huge supply chain issue. And there should be some encouraging policy to help multiple manufacturing hub in Asia, and India has already demonstrated the scale in the IPP business and manufacturing, both on the solar entire value chain as well as on the storage. Could be a huge collaboration opportunity as well.
Great. I think, Vineet, that really helps because, in addition to Parag's inputs on the really market-oriented incentives, what you have underscored is the importance of the role of policy in to access these, new financing frameworks under these large asset managers, but also with considerations of stabilizing supply chains, as we've seen in through the COVID period, that supply chains have become a big focus on how to diversify supply chains and link that multilateral to supply chain considerations and green bond, green climate finance as well. So I'd like to now move to Sanjeev. Sanjeev, great to see you here again on this platform. And I think Sanjeev, you've also, like your peers here, has been a success story in terms of really taking the distributed renewable energy business and sort of, I think you described this earlier once as the sort of the first wave, wherein the way you'd scaled up the business of distributed renewable, it even attracted the likes of Petronas, sort of big oil coming into this space. I'd really like to get your views on, how do you see this time today as being ripe for a further unlocking of that that next sort of wave of the distributed renewable potential, and really why and how?
Right. Thanks, Gauri. So I think from the industry perspective, both the points which Vineet and Parag have made have significant value, because what we see on one hand, there is a significant liquidity in terms of the capital availability, which is looking to get into the clean energy space, ESG space. So that is on one hand, there is a desire amongst the capital providers that we want to get into this clean space. On the other hand, people see India particularly as a very large market where there is a continuing demand for electricity. On the third hand, you have on the third side, what you have is some of these policy and the regulatory challenges which Parag talked about. And this gets compounded by the fact that we have a clear problem at the distribution end, because the distribution reforms, and these have been happening over last 25 years also, it's not something which is new we are talking about here. So there has been a continuing effort to improve the financial position of the distribution companies in the country. And this remains as one single biggest challenge. So anything that we want to do has to start addressing that issue. Now, when you compound that issue with the advances in technology, because if we go back like 10-20 years when the fossil fuel was the only solution, now we have a solution where the distributed energy is possible. Now one can combine the two issues, saying that okay, on one hand, I have a great technology. On the other hand, I have these almost bankrupt utilities. So can I create a new market structure? The new market structure will mean that some of these entities need to literally move out of the way. Moving out of the way means that so that you can go and sell directly to the consumers. Now, selling to the consumers is easier sounding than it is actually in practice, because while from the consumer perspective, from a distributed energy perspective, this is all good because that promotes people's consumption of clean energy in a direct way. But the challenges remain. So I think there is going to be a clever mix in terms of how we do the energy transition. How do we take care of some of these incumbent utilities, some of the factors which have been like more traditional, which have been continuing for a very long time, and we just can't get rid of some of those things overnight. This is going to be an important element how the whole market structure emerges. And unless that market structure really takes shape, it won't be probably a drastic change, because there is a clear social and political angle involved to any of the distribution or the electricity sector reforms, which we just can't say, okay, it's going to happen overnight. But there can be a slow opening up in terms of how you open it up for the consumers by providing them options for the distributed energy. And that's where I think there will be more and more opportunities and more scope for people to get into the distributed energy space, and this will keep on getting defined with solar, storage, to some extent hydrogen, and there will be a continuing role for the larger scale power plants.
Great. I think Sanjeev, going on that scale of innovation, you brought out I think the business model innovation that needs to happen to support, the technology which is there, the energy options which are there, and how to really bring in this grid scale integration. So what you're saying is unlock the market structure and then unlock the DRE potential, right?
It gets automatically unlocked because there is
It
no way
gets
you can
automatically
stop it.
unlocked.
There is so much of
Right.
potential in this one. There is no way you will stop it, or you can stop it, because consumers will start asking for it. When there is so much of
Right.
differential between the grid prices and the power price at which you can generate it, there's going to be more like a movement towards that.
Absolutely. And ultimately, it's about the consumer. So absolutely. Moving on to Raj. Raj, great to see you here. Raj brings a lot of deep, again, expertise in the power segment. I think you're leading AES here. You're also leading the JV between AES and Mitsubishi. And you've had over 35 years experience with Alstom, EDF, and Indorama. So you've really had a long view of this sector, being a direct operator in the sector. So coming back on sort of the innovation scale, back to the technology side of it, we talked about market and policy with the other panelists here. How do you think, Raj, can India increase the grid network flexibility? And really, what are those supporting technologies and innovation you're looking at?
Good evening to all of you. Thanks for inviting me for this panel. Some of you I know, but some of you I've never met. Having said that, let me come to the technology piece. First of all, let me mention about how the technology is being used in US, because that's the petri dish that AES is using for promoting new ideas, new technology. So one of the first takeaway from AES is that we are beginning to use AI, artificial intelligence, and software integrated with hardware, including IoTs, in order to source, price, and distribute renewable energy from the grid, which basically means that AES, while we have almost 10 plus gigawatt of renewable energy, and we are adding 2 to 3 gigawatt per year, for the customer like Google, with whom we have a 24/7 hourly commitment, we are actually devised a software and a hardware integrated solution. And we took the risk, AES takes the risk to guarantee green energy 24/7 on hourly basis. This cannot be done in Indian context. Parag had touched about it. And we all know that we don't have a dispatchable green energy in this country. But this is a solution we have now devised, and you can access it. It's there on the Google. That's one part. So what I'm trying to say here is that it is not only to set up renewable energy on the ground, it is also how intelligently you sell, buy, procure, and contract renewable energy to the clients. That's it's not capital investment, it's an intellectual investment solution. That's the one part. Going forward, EES is going to integrate its own energy investment, green, into these kind of offerings to not only Google, to the other clients. And we can consider this for an application in India as well. But for many of you, you can Google it, go to Applied, and see how Applied has become a unicorn in last 2-3 years. That's the software part of technology. Let's come to the hardware part of technology. So in case of flexibility, the grid flexibility has become a bigger challenge because the renewables are added at a great space, and the task of stabilizing the grid is left to the rest of the people. So while solar and wind is being added, the cost of providing stability is now falling on the third party. And that's where the Parag's comment comes up, that firm power and the regulatory proactiveness is required. It cannot happen in anywhere, including in US, without the government support and proactive regulatory action. So you know that FERC Chairman Neil Chatterjee actually obsessively promoted energy storage, and that's why US is a world leader. And the last and the latest was Alamitos, where there was an open bid where gas plants also bid against energy storage to provide ancillary services in US, and it was floated by utility. They bought this asset. I wish in India utilities are allowed to float tenders for buying energy storage systems. Unfortunately, that's the problem at the moment. So to sum up, energy storage is a very good solution, but there is no guideline that what percentage of energy storage should be part of energy grid. It doesn't, it's not there. There is no mandatory requirement in the bids to have these kind of tenders. The ones which Parag or others alluded to are basically not pure energy stabilizing or grid stabilizing solutions. So we are still away. Last point, because ancillary services are not priced in India, there is very little that energy storage, battery storage can earn out of the revenue stack that is available to them. And therefore, we don't see a very spectacular growth of energy storage in India till some of these issues are addressed. Thanks, Gauri.
Thank you, Raj. I think you really underscored the importance of both the software and the hardware elements. And I think those tie up very close with sort of the customer focus, which Sanjeev spoke about earlier, because that I think gets you closest to the customer and the customer has choice. And in addition, I'm glad you mentioned and clarified that there are no thumb rules for storage, but it is one of the innovations in terms of hard technology that is available, and it depends on a lot of supporting factors to enable that, which policy is part. Coming back to the private financing aspect, which really is the heart of this panel as well. Peter, you bring a lot of experience from all across Asia, and you've had some rich experience with working with the ADB's Asian Clean Energy Forum, with UNIDO, and also 12 countries in Asia through the private financing advisory network, PFAN. And you've also worked with USAID through the SAREP program. So when you see financing from that angle, from the angle of the project developers, one of the biggest challenges always is in this small and medium enterprise sector in developing clean energy projects. So how do you think those challenges can be overcome to enable raising of financing to scale up those business models based on your experience all across Asia?
Well, thank you very much, Gauri, and a pleasure to meet the other panelists. It's a delight to be here. I wanted to start by sort of agreeing on a fundamental point that Sanjeev made about, if you unlock the private sector, you will, and you have the right guardrails, you will really solve a big part of the problem, given also, certain of the sort of policy and regulatory imperatives that have been discussed. But so, if I look at the energy transition and what India is doing and how you get to net zero eventually, I see the corporate sector is really driving commitments in many countries. In fact, going faster than government, because they see the handwriting on the wall that they will not be able to finance their traditional fossil fuel plants. And so the other thing they see is a completely deflationary impact of falling cost of renewables in the market. Just for example, the first utility scale solar plant in Cambodia was built 4 years ago for at 9.1 cents per kilowatt hour. Last year, ADB, using a approach similar to India with solar farms, drawing on a lot of those lessons, got 3.8 cents per kilowatt hour from a Thai developer. So that's in about 4 years' time. I mean, that is completely transformational. So I'm going to pivot and answer the sort of core part of your question is, I guess what I can bring to this panel is, what about all the SMEs? How do we help these project developers build capacity and scale up? Because we can't do it through only large projects. And I think the point that Sanjeev and others have made about really enabling distributed renewable energy, and the point that Rajendra was talking about making this sort of green power available on the grid is just essential. So just briefly, one of the things that our company does is we support UNIDO through its private financing advisory network, which many people may not have heard of, but it's a really sort of fascinating network of about 130 clean energy and climate finance experts around the world. It's operating in 6 regions. It's very active in India and South Asia and also Southeast Asia. We have across the South and Southeast Asia that we oversee a pipeline of 120 projects.
Yeah. I think we lost Peter there. Okay. We'll give him maybe 2 seconds to come back on. Otherwise, Peter, we've lost you if you can hear us.
Can you hear me now?
Okay. Yes, yes.
Sorry, I took a Wi-Fi break. Sorry about that. So anyway, so the thing about working with these projects, and we're writing a paper on this for Technology Perspectives journal. What are the challenges? So first of all is like the quality of the mentors that we provide, and really being able to provide them assistance we need, because we're using donor funding to coach these projects and get them in front of investors and get them financed. So we've worked on 1,000 projects over the past 12 years. We've helped, so about 20% of those, just under 200, have gotten a total of about $2 billion worth of financing. So it's one deal at a time. Now we're working on bundling strategies, but the challenges are having good quality mentors, training them in sort of market knowledge and customer acquisition, being able to price that, how to value their companies, managing risk, because none of them really want to admit the risks, and the exit. What is the exit strategy? So so just to wrap up, I think there's there's so many interesting and innovative business models, and with a concerted approach, and India is clearly one of the most active countries in the world, that when some of the policy guardrails are put in place and some of the proper incentives, and things like the ancillary market, which can enable variable renewable energy and energy storage to have value, you'll see a big uptick in clean energy. And I think the smaller projects are going to be fundamental to success, and there's going to be a lot of work needed to be made by supporting these companies.
Great. Well, thanks, Peter, for sharing more about this network and how you're able to mentor and coach projects to really get in front of investors. And I think you've helped $2 billion of investment, which is fantastic. I think that's a great tool to leverage. I think I'll go back, because you referred to storage. I'll go back to Raj actually at this point. Raj, you have developed the first large-scale battery storage project in India with grid support capability. Can you share how this can be a game changer, and in terms of effective deployment, and also to build a robust domestic supply chain?
Yes, we built this, actually commissioned this in February 2019. So practically, we have the construction experience as well as the operation experience. And for all the audience which is here, we can also share with them that we have submitted a detailed project report through TPDDL, who is our partner, to the Delhi Electricity Regulatory Commission, a revenue stack which encapsulates all the experience of services that it has provided, including those which were not foreseen. So energy storage is a versatile device that can provide DSM in India, which is not required elsewhere in the world, perhaps. But it can provide voltage stabilization, investment deferral, and frequency response. Now, this is exactly a quintessential solution for Indian grid, but at the same time, it is also easily amenable to CNI application. So we have several business applications going on, discussions going on. So one thing that this energy storage has done, it has demonstrated to people that it does what it says. And we have 600 visitors to prove that, including international and domestic players, regulators, industry, etc. The second thing, it has also demonstrated DSM saving in a distribution network. That's something huge. For example, the BSES Rajdhani and Yamuna put together pay 10 to 12 crore of penalty per year on DSM settlement. This is the price that can be saved and should be used for funding such energy storage businesses. And you've put it across the country and you will find several thousand crores are being paid by different utilities, which can be used for funding such projects, which is another learning. The last problem we are having is with respect to the ancillary services. And one of the experts said, we are discussing this for donkey's years. It's still not reached to any meaningful level, even after CRC has put a discussion paper. Last point on supply chain. Wow, that's a good learning for us. What we built for 10, we can now build for 5 or 6. But for everyone to know that even if battery is free on a scale of 1 to 10, the battery may cost 4 or 5, but the rest is the infrastructure in and around the battery storage, which includes firefighting, panels, inverters, transformers, civil structure, or container, and the connectivity. So please keep in mind that, like in solar, if you get solar panels free, still it has a capex. Still you have to invest land, still you have to finance, even for a free solar panel cost. So I would like to request to everyone, including lenders, that don't be obsessed with energy, the battery storage. Battery storage provides just a service, but the whole infrastructure, connectivity, operation skill, maintenance, service by itself can be now 60% of the energy storage installation. So these are some of the big learnings here, but we are hoping, and a lot of your speakers are saying, that the government of India then mandates that there should be every utility distribution company has to have energy storage, mandates it. It also says they have to be islanded, because if islanding mode is required in one avoidable event, you pay back the entire investment. Like in Bombay, for example, if you could island, it could have saved several thousand crores. So there are so many ways, and we are glad that we are the forebearer, the forerunner here to demonstrate this to the government, to the people, and to the utility. But we have not been able to see galloping interest in terms of investment. So your investors, your developers, please feel free, visit the asset, check the DPRs, check the information. We are willing to share. We want to propagate this in country. Thank you, Gauri.
Thanks, Raj. I think you brought out an important point on the application of the possibility of further application in the CNI sector and the ability to save, especially DSM savings. I'll go back to Sanjeev. Sanjeev, when you take what Raj just mentioned in terms of the possibility of such a technology and other technologies to be applied to DRE, how do you see this work out in terms of that further unlocking that you had mentioned before?
So, the technology will keep on evolving. Obviously, storage is one important element, because at some stage, if we say that the consumers must have the right to buy directly, the grid guys are going to say that if you want to buy directly, then make the full arrangement 24/7. Don't come back to us and say, okay, now you provide us the support. So that's going to be one major factor when you want to think, we want to move independent of the grid and go more into DRE. So storage is going to be an important element of that. Having said that, the market again becomes complex here, because people want best of both worlds. People want clean energy, but they don't want to pay for it. So this I think is the biggest dichotomy when we talk about the corporates. So while many of the corporates are willing to pay for a 24/7 clean energy, maybe in US, But when it comes to India and you ask the same corporates that whether you are willing to pay higher than what the grid prices are, the answer is normally no. Okay? So that's where there is a clear challenge that how the cost of some of these technologies need to come down, and for it to come down, if the battery cost over last 5-6 years is an indicator, probably the battery cost will come down, and then it becomes like a standalone energy generation, storage, and consumption system. Till then, we have to work in that complex environment where everybody has to support each other, and probably some of the responsibility will go back to the government and the regulators, that how do they balance the larger social requirements and the move which is required by the corporates to get into the clean energy. They say, I don't think the answers are easy. We just have to keep on evolving as the things evolve in the business model in terms of the to the customers. So it's a slow and probably a steady progress, but in the right direction.
Okay. Great, Sanjeev. I think you've said that it's an evolution, and I think given so many moving parts of the utilities, the consumer, and different aspects in terms of different types of customers, whether you're talking about the small and medium scale, the CNI sector, or you're talking about the residential sector, I think comes the importance of platforms, how to integrate all these differing elements and bring in that glue, and that's where I look again to Parag. Parag, you're obviously developing one of India's leading in such a short span of time. You've achieved a lot of progress. So can you share more about how important are these platforms for this clean energy transition, and maybe to make this evolution that Sanjeev talked faster?
Yeah, sure, Gauri. So I see that they bring in three things. All the independent platforms like ours. First is obviously investment, and that is something which India requires a lot. We are talking about 50 gigawatt a year kind of a number. We may perhaps become the second largest in the world in terms of installed capacity in renewables. Today we might be fourth. So that is one clear thing which these platform brings. They bring a lot of investments. The second thing is competition. So if you see in India, there has been always ups and downs. There has been years in which the bids were never even fully subscribed, and there were shortage of people who were really bidding for it. And today the things are much better. In one of the recent tenders, the subscription ratio was as high as 22:1, and this was for the RUMS tender. So we see that slowly the more number of people really start bidding, more is the advantage that the India gets in terms of reduction in tariff. So sometimes too much of competition also is not so good. But yes, I believe this is a temporary phase. Moment the more number of bids will come out, hopefully things will be more balanced out. And the last thing I would say what these platform brings is the global practices. Just to give you an example, we as an industry was struggling when the work in Rajasthan almost came to a halt on the background of GIB Supreme Court order. And we were preparing petition for the same. And then we took help of companies like Anil, EDF, some of our counterparts are also in US to bring down the best practices of what happened in these countries. There was a bird problem. They were able to convince the lenders. So this is just one example in multiple areas. If today government is talking about MPED framework or ancillary services market, we all have our counterparts in different countries, and the quality of input that we can give either on the regulatory matters or on, I would say, uh, improving this improving the standard bidding documents, maybe a new financing structure. So that is the third thing that we bring in, that which is the standard global or better global practices.
Great. So I think again, Parag, you highlighted certain hard aspects of enabling this energy transition through platforms, but then the softer aspects of best practices, which otherwise would just not be available. So I think that's a very important takeaway for this discussion. I'd like to come back in terms of, when we talk about best practices, going back to a more regional perspective again with Peter. So Peter, given your rich experience all through Asia, how can a sort of a South Asian regional cooperation be leveraged to drive the energy transition and energy security in India, and to work with organizations like USAID, for instance?
Well, I think and I'd like to sort of recognize Monali, who made remarks earlier, and her role in that, and her colleagues at USAID. And I've had the privilege of working on several USAID projects. I helped to run the first clean energy project under President Obama back in 2006 to 2011. In fact, interesting, the first 2 years it was under President Bush, and the word climate was not allowed to be used in the name. And then Obama came in, and it became a clean energy and climate program. And then I worked on the PACE-D program, run out of India, which had a lot of success, working with India Oil, SECI, many other partners on some of the things that Parag was talking about on sharing of best practices. And I think
I think we've lost Peter again. Let's give him a quick Wi-Fi break here. He comes back. Okay, you're back.
Fantastic. Okay. So are we good?
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah. So no, I think that USAID's development perspective, and I was going to say, maybe because I was saying something irreverent, it's an oxymoron for a bureaucracy to be nimble. But in fact, USAID is quite nimble with its technical assistance. They can bring in expertise from the US, share expertise across the region. And in the SAREC program, which is the South Asia Regional Energy Program, which is just starting up now, going to be looking at a sort of an approach to working with established partners in the region, including utilities, including tech innovators, including energy efficiency companies, on some of the key issues. What is the utility business model of the future? How do utilities reinvent themselves, or do they just die, as was mentioned earlier? If they're going bankrupt, maybe they just get out of the way. What are the technologies that are AI driven, that are data enabled, that will sort of allow us to have firmer power, that will improve energy efficiency and DSM, as Raj was talking about? And then, how do you, one thing that's going to be an important part of SAREP is really working on competitive procurement, revealing what the prices are. How do you do that in a way that's open and transparent, and where you don't have too much competition, as Sanjeev was saying, where you don't drive companies out of business, but ensure reliability. And finally, the issue of cross-border trade can really help solve a lot of problems if there is more transparent and open access to any independent generator within a country, but also a dynamic market between countries in the region. And I won't go into the specifics, but it's obviously a big topic and is very important for the South Asia region, not just for India, but for India's neighbors as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. So I think we've lost Vineet here, but I think he made some very detailed comments. So we have his thinking and Avada's thinking in this space. I'll just summarize what all the experts on the panel have shared, that I think they've really provided the ideal world for private investment. What is that space for private investment? What is needed? What are the enablers? What are the soft factors? What are the hard factors? Infrastructure can always be viewed in the software and the hardware dimensions. And I think, there was a lot of discussion on that. What's the role of platforms? What's the role of G2G frameworks like USAID, like USISPF? And are there any other factors in terms of case studies that we are now seeing emerging And it being a transition, this ideal world doesn't happen all at once. It takes time. There is a time element to it. So on that note, I would like to hand it back to USISPF. Nolte Theriot is the Senior Vice President from USISPF. Over to you, Nolte. Thank you so much.
Gauri, and on behalf of USISPF, I would like to thank all of the participants and esteemed panelists for sharing their valuable insights during this G2G Industry Advisory Council session on private sector investment that will help advance India's clean energy transition. The panel's discussion was extremely informative in terms of identifying how investments can be more impactful in helping India achieve its ambitious renewable energy targets. The panel also provided a good opportunity to better understand some of the challenges faced by the sector, as well as how these investments can be useful in the development of sustainable energy solutions. As private industry stakeholders, USISPF members are committed to supporting the efforts of the government in furthering India's clean energy transition, be it through deployment of capital investments to scale up technology, pilot studies that identify affordable technology solutions, and also through mitigating regulatory barriers. And we look forward to continuing to play a leadership role in these constructive dialogues and engage experts from different fields to help the private sector better support India's RE integration. So in closing, I want to thank Manali, the USAID team, and all of the participants. I hope you stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. This concludes the program. Please take care.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.